I am chatting with Jared Greer, who is Director of Portfolio Operations at QHP Capital, which is a client of 51 Labs. Jared and I have a lot in common. Here are some interesting things to know about him. He's an executive coach. He works with the portfolio companies of QHP, husband, father of four, six-time Ironman, ultra marathoner, and this man brings structure to chaos to get some results. Jared, it is awesome to have you here. We could probably do 15 episodes because I got a lot to cover for maybe some personal issues, professional issues, everywhere in between. How do you grow this business? How do you grow the family? Oh my gosh, where do we start? But Jared, let's start off with, what is the job of a CEO?
Yeah, awesome. First of all, thank you for having me. Super excited to be here and just learn from you and share with you and your audience. Yeah, job of a CEO is not an easy one. I think at its most basic level, it is to kind of establish the vision, whether that's through kind of saying, hey, here's the direction we're going, or that is a sense of, hey, let's come all together and let's figure out what that vision is, but establish the vision and then support the execution of that vision. And fundamentally, that's it. That comes with a lot of nuance and a lot of other components.
Yeah.
But man, that CEO has to know where they're headed and then has to rally everybody to actually get the work done to achieve that vision.
So where do people get stuck? Where are the challenges? Because it seems like everyone probably in the QHP portfolio and other, private equity backed portfolio companies understands that conceptually, but what happens? What are the faults that happen in the execution of that role and responsibility?
Yeah, I would say a huge one, especially for our portfolio companies. We really target family and founder-owned businesses. So these are people who, in many cases, have kind of like just been banging it out for several years, have found some success and have done well, but now they've kind of hit this point where they are stuck, where they can't grow. I think it's Marshall Goldsmith who says, "What got you here won't get you there." And I have flipped that to say, what got you here gets you stuck, because they do hit this point where they have to evolve. They've got to change the way that they do things. And I would say paramount to that is trust. There's just a lack of trust in other people making the decisions, other people executing on the tasks. And that, I think, probably is one of the very, very first barriers. The second, I would say, is an inability to adapt new skills. You've got to change as you kind of evolve what you've been good at and what has got you here. Now is your sticking point. So you've got to equip yourself with new tools to kind of push past and propel yourself forward.
So when you think about the founders and management teams that you typically back, like, what's the general size and shape of the companies, and what are some of the tools that they might need to develop to upskill to be the CEO of where they're going to be in, 3 to 5 years or 5 to 7 years, whatever is going to be the holding time of the partnership with QHP?
Yeah, I think it depends on the type of company that we've purchased. We've got some that are kind of like a buy and build. We've got some that are actually like we're just kind of building it on its own. And then you've got some that are pretty well established that now we're kind of bringing together. So leadership teams range in some cases from like as big as 7 all the way up to 15 or 16, depending on the size of the company. We've got some that are 100 million plus. I think some of our biggest are 500-600 million at this point. And then you've got some that are as small as 20 million.
Yeah.
So varying degrees. We've got kind of our tried and true management system that gives them those tools, because at that inflection point, again, for a lot of these, they've kind of done whatever they've needed to get to the next point. Maybe that's to be able to get to market, to be able to win that big customer, now to maybe be prepared for an investment. And so it's kind of that way of thinking, and that is, hey, we're going to exhaust all of our ideas. We're going to go after every opportunity. But now in order to grow from where they're at to where we want to take them, which is in size and scale, they've got to like rein it in and now kind of beat the same drum over and over. And so they've got to have that set of tools that they leverage instead of, oh, I have this idea, I'm going to go chase it. Oh, I'm going to have that idea, I'm going to go chase it. It's now much more strategic, being very clear about what we're trying to accomplish, where we're headed, and then really just rolling into this system of scale. Some of those components are, just simply like, how do we measure things? We use tracking sheets that really maps productivity through the organization. Those tracking sheets are built off of crystal clear roles and responsibilities that are complete with what every role actually produces and every role requires from the other parts of the business. Those two things are uh, most often not done in kind of the space that we're in, the size of companies that we buy. When we buy them, they haven't really done this. They've kind of said, oh, here's an org chart. I'm the CEO, I'm the COO. But nobody's like really granularly looked at how does the work flow through your business? Who does what? What's required to do it well? What are they required to hand off? And then who makes the decisions? Which again, all gets back to you've got a CEO who's who's not able to give that permission, that authority away, and so they're getting pinged with all of the questions, all of the permissions, and that is a huge time suck. You've got to push that down through the organization.
Is the issue trust, or is it hiring the right people for the right roles? Because it feels like intuitively, like I we have a lot of trust in our team
Mm-hmm.
of over 10 people. And maybe even too much of just like, because I think that's how I wanted to be treated when I was coming up in my 20s and 30s, and now I'm 40, of like, I wanted to just run with it because I knew that I was capable
Yeah.
of running with it.
Yep.
So I feel like for that particular dynamic, we have a lot of trust with our team. But what have you seen are some of the trust issues?
Yeah.
And
It's I wouldn't blanket statement it's all trust. I wouldn't blanket statement it's all hiring right or wrong, right? I think those two things can both be true. You can trust somebody, but they're not capable. Okay, you cannot trust somebody, and you can have still hired right. So there's kind of a push and pull there. Sometimes, though, a lack of trust is communicated as, well, they're not the right person because they're not able to do it the way that you would do it as the founder, as the owner, as the CEO, as the leader. And so sometimes CEOs forget kind of where they came from and all that had to happen for them to be able to learn how to do something well. And when we hire people, there's still a little bit of that learning curve. So even though we might have hired the right person, they may not be like hitting the strike zone every single time. But a good CEO will recognize, hey, I'm probably going to give them some assignments that they're going to fail on. But then I'm going to coach them and give them another crack at doing it all on their own. And then we're going to see, did this person take the coaching, take the adjustment, and actually step up to the plate? Or did they totally drop the ball again? Well, now you've got a clear variable of, I trusted them, gave them the assignment to do it. They didn't do it. I gave them feedback. Now I trusted them again to do it, and now they failed. Now you can start to have a conversation of, is this the right hire?
yeah,
But very often I see people who are still involved in the weeds and unable to pull away and trust people to go do the work without their fingerprints all over it. And let me just say, like, what happens in that scenario is that person who has been asked to do the assignment, but then, my words, not anybody else's, then gets meddled with all through the process. They're not taking ownership of the failure. They're saying, well, I wasn't able to do it because CEO, leader, boss, supervisor was all up in my business and they had their fingerprints all over it. So the failure can't even be their own. It's got to be shared, and most likely that's going to be a blame game pointing at each other.
it's so hard to do when you, as a leader, can see a high risk of failure but do you just let them run with it?
Well,
And
so
then,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, when you're like, I know what good looks like, and I really want to give my opinion and say, hey, listen, like, I'll do it 10 times faster. Here's a solution. Just execute that. Do right for the client versus, and maybe this is not mutually exclusive, like let the person execute and with the team and see what happens. Is that training opportunity worth it?
So the trigger word, the caution flag that I heard from what you just said was, I can do it 10 times faster. That belief alone is going to drive you to be more involved than you should, and give less away than you should. So as your business grows and scales, like, you might be able to do that thing faster, but nobody else is then doing strategy.
Hmm.
And if you can do it faster, that of course you can, because you've got the experience, you've got the knowledge, you've got the know-how. You're probably going to really have to pay a lot of money for someone who can do it faster than you. So if that's an investment you're willing to make, then go do it. But if it's somebody who they've got kind of the fundamental skills, they've got the potential, then they need that repetition to also be able to do it as fast as you.
Yeah. Or, and I think actually, whenever my co-CEO and wife Jing and I feel that we need to execute on a task, for example, review a video, review a website, review a LinkedIn post, review a graphic, which across 20 plus projects, it's not that a lot of things are multiple hours of time investment, but they're like these little 5 and 10 minute tasks spread out through a day, over a week, over 20 plus projects. And I think what we need to do to evolve as leaders and managers is recognize when that is happening, pause and ask, what's the process? What's the
Enter.
SOP? What's
Yep,
the training?
exactly right.
And okay, if I am going to edit this post, then I should also be required to write out the training note or the process improvement. If I am going to edit this video and say, hey, the first 3 seconds needs to be faster and catchier and better, then I also should be to take that time, whether it's double or triple the time, to write out the training, to write out the SOP, to write out the examples.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And so two things you hit on. One is, like, you're exactly right. The processes involved, they should be documented. The other thing is that clarity of who does what do they need to be able to do the job well, and then what are they accountable to produce? And then kind of the sister to that is, then how is that performance measured? So yeah, processes absolutely should be documented. That would be fundamental. Like, number one, a lot of our companies, they have not documented their processes. It's the original group of people who have kind of cobbled things together, and they kind of know how to do it. And now it's a matter of, well, how do we now transfer that knowledge to somebody else? And that's where trust comes in. Well, one, you can't, because you don't have the process documented. And two, you don't trust somebody else to execute it because you know all the nuance about it. So first and foremost, getting really clear on who does what. Secondly, documenting those processes is vital. But the third thing here is your ability to give the guidelines to the task, which is going to come in the process. But if you think about what you guys do in terms of marketing, you probably have criteria that should be met for every single video or every single piece of work that's produced. So how well have you communicated that criteria up front? And if you're getting the product back and it's missing things that you didn't clearly articulate, not saying you have to micromanage every detail, but it doesn't hit kind of the big general ideas, then you maybe didn't articulate the criteria enough to say, here's the task, you go do it. I'm not involved beyond checking in at maybe these points and then finding out. So again, like, a lot of those components go together, but a lot of people just miss them. And then the easy bell to ring is, I didn't hire right.
So I think this is interesting and timely because as Jing, again, my co-CEO and wife, is pregnant with twins and expected in April. Who knows how many months she'll be out completely,
Hands
or
down.
50% or 25%. So we can use Q1 to document all of her roles and responsibilities and processes and be like, what do we need to what do I need to step into as co-CEO, but also what can we hire out? Because it's almost like when you're a small business, especially, you're just spending so much of every single day just doing as
Yep.
opposed to thinking
Yep.
and planning. So we need to use this time before the twins arrive to really document what does she do,
Yep.
because that's going to force us, like, where are we at as an overall business and how do we get to the next stage. The next stage is not us doing what we're currently doing.
Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I hope any um, owner, CEO, anybody who's struggling with capacity, I hope they listen to what you just said, because your co-founder, co-CEO is now going to be absent for whatever reason. And there's a whole bunch of knowledge that's going to go with her because it's in her head. And that is going to create a gap between your goals and what you guys are trying to accomplish. So you've got to have that somewhere that it can then be executed on in her absence. And that is the distinction between the types of companies that we buy and where we're trying to take them. They've got to shift from it's all on me as a CEO, founder, I'm the knowledge base, to it has to get done through other people. And you can't do that without really clear roles, responsibilities, who's going to do what, and then ultimately, those decision making rights, and then also how you're going to measure it. So I think you hit the nail on the head with now that your wife is going to be gone, she's going to be absent. She's got all of the kind of institutional knowledge in her head that goes with her. So if it's not documented, if the criteria for these projects isn't really clear, then it's going to be very hard, almost impossible to execute to the same level while she's gone by the people that you've now hired, which does have a huge impact on your customers and the continuity that you provide to them. So,
Well,
go
where
ahead.
we're at currently, so if you look at the different functions of the business between sales, marketing, execution, and kind of general ops, including finance. The team, we now have an account supervisor, we have a senior account executive, an account executive, and two junior account executives.
Awesome.
Um, video video project manager, and we have a graphics team and a web team. So Jing, my co-CEO, is currently her project execution is really around like big picture staffing of the team and reviewing, billable hours, discounting where we need to, providing project guidance. Um, so from a client execution perspective, uh, her involvement is I would say, call it less than 10% of her week.
Hmm.
My involvement is more strategic, which needs to be replaced by eventually by a true experienced mid-level. So, when we're having a kickoff meeting and we're talking about commercial due diligence for an accounting client that services private equity, like, that's 10 plus years of industry knowledge.
Sure.
But that's one of the things that's preventing us from going to the next level. So if you look at the different functions, like sales is me and Jing and one of our other colleagues. But that function is the highest risk. Marketing, lower risk. Execution, low risk. When we went to Japan for 3 weeks and we were 14 or 13 hours ahead, like, the team executed all the projects. It was awesome.
Well,
I
that
think what we noticed is that if there's a new project that needs like true strategic planning, then that's where we need to develop the team to replace me and Jing. Um, but I think that the processes that will fail are around like finance,
hmm.
taxes, invoicing on time. When you have 20 plus projects, right? You're doing at least 20 invoices a month.
Yep.
And So I think the finance function's at risk, the sales function's at risk. Um, but it's interesting because this is like a forcing function that's on a relatively planned schedule.
Yeah. 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 I mean, what's interesting, and we, again, with our portfolio companies, a lot of the same kind of hot spots. Um, Sales is one that is constantly pulling senior leaders into the weeds, quite frankly. And that's where I would say there is a lack of trust. It might also be it's a lack of the right talent behind you to
Well,
be able to
and
hand
that's
that
right.
off.
Right. If we were to build out the sales function for a private equity focused marketing firm, where could we hire from? We could hire from other agencies that focus on it, or if you look at PitchBook, like their marketing team, their BD team sells to the same client base, or other players in a similar market, like a data room providers who sell to a similar market. But then we need to rethink the comp structure for sales or a true senior leader. Then we're talking about profit share and or equity that we need to figure out how to negotiate because with Jing gone, there's a higher risk of us either flatlining or declining because of a 3 month lull where you're in survival mode, and then that rolls into the second half of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think y- again, processes, standard operating procedures absolutely should be documented. Like that's kind of fundamental. I would also ask you, like, who in your organization right now is interested in or has the potential to be able to step into a sales role? And you don't have to say
Well,
name, but is
yeah,
there
I mean, no,
someone
no,
that
it's
comes
fine.
to
This
mind?
we're very open. So our recently promoted account supervisor, who's been with us for just over 2 years, was promoted over the Christmas break.
Cool.
Has the most client knowledge, the most industry knowledge, but also manages the team, the execution of the work that we do across 20 plus projects in branding, website, video, LinkedIn, full service marketing. Um, so she's the most capable of being able to slide into that role. But right now, like we need servicing clients at the quality that they expect is the highest priority.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would just say, do you see yourself, 3 years, 5 years from now doing the sales?
If I am, then we have not succeeded.
Okay, so the answer is no. So when is that kind of point that you expect you will no longer be doing sales?
I think that this year, within the next 6 months, we need to hire a junior BD person that makes the decks, that takes the meeting notes, that learns the ropes, and then they're appropriately able to go into our tier one, tier twos, tier threes that we have some level of connection with, as opposed to random cold outbound from a 28-year-old who doesn't really know the industry, or a 26-year-old who might gone two or three different jobs. I think that the hiring plan, I think, is hire that junior BD person, train them for 6 to 12 months, and then as they mature and they're known by our client base, they can expand into a full time role, or I'm
So
sorry, a larger role.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I would encourage, and this is where one of the things that I teach my clients is like the core four, which is an alignment of your vision, what you're trying to accomplish, your values, kind of who you are, your beliefs or assumptions that you're making about yourself, others, or your circumstances, and then the actions that you take. And everything starts with that vision. So the question I asked was, at what point are you no longer doing sales? I want to know that finish line. If that's 18 months from now, then that's 18 months from now. Then you can backtrack it to, we got to have the BD in seat by this person. You said 6 months. They're then in seat on calls for 6 to 12 months. But what was unclear from your answer was, when is that time? Is it 18 months from today? Like, when's your finish line? When do you know I'm no longer doing sales?
So if I had to think specifically, bottoms up, hire that junior person by March, give them 6 to 9 months to really understand it, to the point that I could send them to the McGuire Woods conference for emerging managers and independent sponsors, and they could work the room. They know the client base, 9 intense months of a boot camp, basically.
Yep.
Where I would say by January 2026, if they're able to handle more than 50% of the sales function at our current scale, I think that would be a success.
So what is the date you will no longer be doing sales?
And so from that, I think it takes to truly own that function, I think should be a year if we hire the right level.
Perfect. So January 2027, Jordan's no longer doing sales.
2026, January 2026. Yeah, 9 months to fully ramp it up. And then it's a matter of like, what level do you want to hire, then the compensation structure for that.
For sure. I think what's important here is there's always going to be like an upcoming project or a new potential.
You're focusing on refine the what, figure out the how later.
Amen. So I want the X on the map. I want to know with absolute clarity what that X on the map is. Because the dotted lines that go to the X, that's going to be all wonky and that can change. But I want to know, what is the X on the map? What is the treasure that I'm working for? The finish line that I'm going to hit? And it needs to be concrete. Because like I said, otherwise you're going to then always have a new project or a potential customer or some reason to kick that can down the road of getting somebody into the sales seat. But if you say by January 2026, 2027, I am no longer doing sales, well, now you can start to map out what needs to happen. And you've got a higher level of intentionality behind it. I mean, no joke. We just had a call this last week with a CEO of one of our companies we bought probably 2.5 years ago. 2.5 years ago. And he's still talking about how he's being pulled into these sales calls. And that is the reason he's not doing strategic stuff. And I just know from all of my experience that it is very easy to relinquish, or very difficult to relinquish that control.
This reminds me about a podcast I shot with one of your other CEOs, Ruby, at Applied Stem Cell. And she was joking about how when they were doing the management install and subsequent board meetings, of just her getting out of every function and thinking as a visionary leader and empowering the team, and how difficult it was for her, and how much Vern nudged might be one way to put it. But and it was, you could tell and you could feel the sense of relief that she could see the end in sight about that previous chapter and how to evolve into the next chapter. And it was such a good reminder. It was almost like it was just like therapeutic for me to listen to her story. Like, oh, there are people who are much bigger than our business who are experiencing the same thing of getting out of the previous role.
Yep.
And evolving into the next role.
And that's difficult, and tons of empathy for anybody who has built anything. To hand it off in any way is so hard. So I totally understand that. But yeah, it's like to get to that next level, you've got to equip yourself with new skills and new tools. And you have to relinquish some of that control, and you have to give trust to some people who aren't proven yet. They're not tested. But I think about it almost like parenting. Like, I can tie my 6-year-old's shoes for her every time. I can do that for the rest of her life. But the reality is then I will always be tying her shoes. And it's the same thing for a CEO. If that's great that you can go do something that somebody else should be doing. But if you go do that thing, you will always be doing that thing. And in our business, that's a huge hindrance to the business growing and scaling. And quite frankly, you won't survive. You won't last if you're continuously doing the things that your people should be doing. Now, yes, you've got to hire right, for sure. But you should, more importantly, be equipping them with skills. So an encouragement that I have for a lot of executives kind of in your size of business, or even bigger, is whenever you're doing one of these things that you know eventually you will not do, where possible, you have somebody with you who's learning it, who's observing it, who is being developed. Because when you're doing it isolated with nobody there to learn or observe or to, kind of see the nuance of it, like it's not a waste of time because you're getting new business, but you're not transferring that knowledge. You're not transferring that expertise, which means,
Yeah, and
well, you've got to continue to do it.
as we're talking about this, it's making me come to a important realization of when you're leading a company, you want that 2 months in the mountains with no distraction to think strategically. And you wake up at 6 a.m., you meditate, you exercise, you have your coffee, and you have 10 hours, no employees, no family, no
Right?
kids
Yeah.
to think about where this business is going. You want your Bill Gates, by the lake experience for a week, but it ain't going to happen. And I think that I need to change my expectations that we have to figure it out. We have to build the plane as as we're falling.
Yeah.
And that's just a matter of changing the expectations that we're not going to get that week off offsite in a small business and with a family. And so I think the expectation is that it will be painful to slow down. You might have your revenue dip in that particular month or 2 months as you are repouring the foundation of the next house, not an addition to the current house, but you're going to a whole new house for
Yeah.
the next level. And I think I just have to, you know, I just have to adjust my expectations that this is going to be painful. It ain't going to be easy, but if it is not done, it's going to be a heck of a lot more painful when systems break.
And Jordan, like, how you've been doing this for how long?
51 Labs, we've been doing this for 6 years, and I've been an entrepreneur since 2016.
Yeah. So talk to me about one of the biggest mistakes you made. Maybe losing a customer, maybe not winning a customer. Like, talk to me about one of those huge mistakes that happened at some point in your business.
So I think that there are a couple of categories of mistakes. One is the immediate painful one, and then the other ones are the slow boiling. and you get to year 6, and you're like, wait a second, we should be larger than we are.
I want to hear about the immediate painful one.
Um, and we can bifurcate that into customer facing and employee facing. And I'll start off with employee facing. I think maybe the first painful one was for employee facing was I think we did an organizational checkup through, which is one of the EOS tools. And some of the reviews, and this was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, was that I was creating chaos through just being too frantic, not systematic, unplanned, which gives me energy as an individual, but is not productive for the team, it creates stress and anxiety for the team. And so I almost had to separate myself. Actually, not I didn't. Jing, my co-CEO, separated me from the team. And then also our now account supervisor grew in her skills and abilities to managing the team. So almost as like a buffer to the execution. And so that allowed me, when me as the visionary in EOS parlance is thinking of a million ideas a minute, and the team, when they get a Slack message at 8 p.m. on a Wednesday from the CEO, do I execute this now? Do I stop everything else? Like, that's painful, and it creates anxiety for the team. And Jing almost, and our account supervisor can filter that, and they know me as an individual and not and how to process that, and also how to harness the visionary, buffer that from the team, and to integrate that into the actual execution of the services. Yeah, there are so many painful moments, and maybe it's just But I think the slower burn pain on the other type of pain is coming from almost like this feeling like we should be further than we are. How do you balance being ambitious and wanting more and knowing that the team and are capable of more, with also the fact that we have survived 6 years in a profitable high margin business through
Yep.
COVID, had no idea what we were creating because we had never been in a marketing firm or an agency. So I had to learn how to create this. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and um, maybe another painful moment was in 2019 when we had a client that stopped working with us. And it was basically like, hey, you didn't do your job. You did all these other things, but I hired you to do this thing.
And what did you, so I love that. What did you learn from that? And then what did you do differently in your business as a result?
One of our past clients, amazing. Plexus Capital has this phrase, do what you say will you do, DWISYD. I have it in my journal, etc. And it's almost like this constant reminder of when I feel like I'm going into crazy visionary mode with a million ideas, like do what you say we will do. And it's 100% not perfect, but it's that reminder of like, that is one of my weaknesses. Like one of my strengths as an individual is thinking of ideas. One of my weaknesses of an individual is thinking of ideas and just following those squirrels
Yeah.
and those shiny objects. So this goes to another pain that I'm thinking about now of when I tell Jing, my business partner, this is what I say, well, I will do. You don't have to follow up and see that I did it. Like that puts stress on my business partner, my wife, pregnant with twins, 2 kids, of did Jordan do what he said he would do?
Yeah.
And so I think like that's the pain of seeing the weight of that anxiety and stress on her as a business partner and a spouse and life partner. So I think, how do you solve that?
Well, so what I love though is, and the reason why I asked that question, like, what are those pains? Like, you have had pains in growing this business, and those pains have led to learning, that has led to change, that has helped you be better at what you do. So you're probably more clear with your clients about what you're going to do. You're probably more explicit about what the details of that agreement are. And then you execute probably much more aligned with what those are, right? So early days, maybe you just like jotted some stuff down, you thought you were aligned and you went and did it until you had this like burning moment. My point is, as you grow to where you're trying to go, the people who you're bringing up under you, they've got to experience some of those same dropped balls. And that is really hard for somebody who has already learned that, because you want to avoid that, not only for the business but also for them. Like, you care about them. So that then propels you and any leader to be more involved, to be over involved. But then you get to a point where, like I said, like you have to always be doing it, because you haven't given anybody else the runway to be bad at it so they can be good at it. And that means you will be stuck. Your business will be stuck for a long time until you can finally do that. I've got a really good example of this. I've got a client who, so in my coaching business, she ran a foundation and she had been running it for 14 years. It was her and an executive assistant. And she came to me because she was like, Jared, I'm like fed up. Like, I'm so overwhelmed. I'm doing everything. I'm just burned out, just completely burned out. And as I got to talking to her, she was literally doing like everything from the front line all the way up to what she should be doing, which as CEO and president, right? She had no help. So we very first got her help. Like, if you feel overwhelmed, you need a new capability, you need a new tool, a new resource, something. So we started looking, okay, what do you need? We actually got rid of her executive assistant because she was busy, but she wasn't productive. We brought in a new executive assistant. We brought in somebody to manage finances. And we brought in somebody to manage kind of the processes internally. But the number one problem that we had was everything was in her head. So we had to pull everything out. We had to start documenting it. We started working on her ability to give good, clear instructions that enabled and empowered trust that led to effective execution. the craziest thing is I worked with her for probably about 9 months, and at 9 months, she had her parents had been divorced, and so both of her parents had been remarried. And so at 9 months, her dad died. Like not even a month later than that, her stepmom died. A couple months after that, her mom died, leaving only her stepmom or stepdad. And in this period of time, because of the work she had done to get out of what was in her head into the hands of other people, empowering them to go make mistakes, she was able to go and manage the funerals. She was able to be with family. She was able to grieve. She was able to actually like spend the time on those things that really truly matter versus being in the business, pulling all the levers and pushing all the buttons. Now, post all of that, I just concluded my work with her when I joined QHP. Um, Her team is like they're a well-oiled machine. They have an annual calendar of all of the major milestones that have to happen. They have processes created for the major things that they do with each engagement. Like everything is systematic. There's still nuance in her head that is not documented that, kind of shows up as friction every now and then. But she actually every year she now is going to Colorado and spending basically the whole month of July in the mountains doing that strategic stuff that you talked about. So it's possible. It just does require that relinquishment of control, that trust in others with guidance and with the knowledge that like they're not going to do it like you.
Yeah.
They're not. And that's got to be okay in the beginning and really in the long run, as long as it meets good criteria that you have clearly articulated.
So shifting gears completely, and on a personal note for you, out of the 6 Ironmans and ultra marathon that you did and all the endurance stuff, what what are maybe some of the top lessons that you have learned from doing all of these endurance events?
Man, the very first is those three. There's just three components to performance: being consistent, meaning we do the things that we know we should do. We are correct, meaning we have the right tools and knowledge and resources to do what we need to do, and then being controlled, like managing the pace of things. So I think Ironman is such a good example because to be consistent, you have to have real clear vision of what you're trying to accomplish, and you have to kind of know what you need to be doing. And then you've got to do that repetitively, and that's measured by repetition. Really, that's all. It's measured by repetition. Then you have to have the right equipment. You've got to have a bike. You should probably have a wetsuit unless you're like super hardcore. I'm not. You should know how to swim. Like that's knowledge that you have to have. So like it's one thing to say, hey, I'm consistent. I, go and I exercise all the time. But if you don't have a bike, it doesn't matter how like passionate you are about what you're trying to accomplish. So you have to have that equipment. And then that control piece of, man, you can go out and you've done enough of these. I think you've done more than me at this point. Like you can spend your energy very very fast, and that plays on the tail end. That will come back to bite you. So it is a kind of a game of managing that control and that intensity. And all of us have been to the point where we go into the gym and we're not really in it. We're just going through the motions. We're correct. Like we've got the equipment there. We're consistent. We're showing up. We're in the right place where learning can happen, where growth can happen. But our intensity is lazy or it's passive. And so those three components just come up to me all the time in all of my work. That's easily the top lesson that I've learned. The second, which I think is probably more fitting for just life in general. So I got introduced to endurance sports through the Grand Canyon. I overheard some guys talking about going and doing this hike in the Grand Canyon, and they were kind of talking about it like it was all serious. And I was like, you guys know it's just walking, right? And kind of their ringleader was like, he kind of like looks over and he's like, you should come with us. And I had never been to the Grand Canyon, so I was like, sure, why not? So we go to the Grand Canyon, and what he's talking about is doing rim to rim to rim. which is a 50-mile hike, down to the bottom, across the other side, up to the top, down, back, etc. Um, it literally took my breath away when I saw the Grand Canyon. Long story short, I failed that first time, made it across to one side, and I was like, I will die if I try to go back. But 6 months later, I went back and we started spending a lot of time in the Grand Canyon doing rim to rim. For my 40th, I went and I did the R5, which is 100 miles, which is the R3, the rim to rim to rim twice. Did that for my 40th. Here's the lesson that I've learned. 100% of the time that I've been in the Grand Canyon, I have gone to the bottom and I have seen people who are stuck. And the unique thing about the Grand Canyon is that to go down is very easy. And the Grand Canyon is beautiful. So you can walk down all day long. It's easy, it's convenient, it's beautiful. You can chat it up and you can just walk all the way down. That's in some cases, the North Rim is 6 miles, the South Rim is 4 miles. And inevitably, people get stuck because at some point you have to turn around and you've got to come back up. And that is a harsh reality for people to realize that they are not in shape to come back up. And we've seen people stuck so many times just sitting there. And so that's become kind of a metaphor for life for me, that like there's a lot of easy, convenient ways to do things, but inevitably those lead to a point where you've got to come or turn around and do real work. So all of the endurance racing, all of those lessons really have taught me that to take the hard road, do the hard thing, whether that's, equipping myself with a new skill set, having a tough conversation, going out on my own, because I know what's easy and I know what's convenient, and I just know that gets us stuck.
I love it. And that's, made me think about one of the reasons why I do this is when you do a Ironman or a marathon, you get more data to prove that you can do hard things, so that when life gets really hard with health or whatever, I now have data to say I've done hard things and I know that I can do it and get through the wall, get through that point when you want to quit. Because I have 7 Ironmans when multiple times I wanted to quit. I got a bunch of marathons when multiple times I thought this was a bad idea, and even a worse idea that I actually paid for it.
Yeah.
So that gave data to show that you could push, and it gave meaning to the pain, meaning to the suffering, that it serves a larger purpose of getting stuff to be stronger as a family member. And also, if other people saw that, then maybe that encouraged them to go off and do, their first 5K that they walked, whatever that is. This is making me think about something related when it comes to sometimes in high performing industries and companies, you just feel like you're sprinting. I did investment banking for 6 years, and it seems like every day is a sprint, every week is a sprint.
Yeah.
But, just like training for a marathon, you have different seasons for things. So we're trying to figure out, how do we create those seasons and those races for the team, so we know, like, hey, we're in the final training block, this is when we sprint. How do we create those seasons and predictability for their training on when to increase the load, when to decrease it? Because when you have high performers, sometimes they don't know that they need to pull back, and we need to figure that out as leaders and coaches.
Yep.
For our employees.
Yeah, I think there's two things. One of the things I believe is that the performance of routine creates routine performance, meaning we're all bonded to routine. Truly, even if we are chaotic and we are, just easily distracted, that's a routine that if we play out over and over and over, that's going to be our life. That's our routine. So I think of systems and routine in that kind of same way of, like, if I can build like the perfect system and I can just routinize it, my word, I don't think that's a real word, but like if I can routinize it, then that makes it so much easier to just go move through. And then before you know, I mean, you've trained for 7 Ironmans, which no doubt has you at some points training probably close to 20 hours a week, right? And think about how hard those really hard weeks are where you've got a 6 hour bike ride and a 3 hour run and all of the workload and family load, and then contrast it with like a lighter week where you still do more than most people, and yet it's like, oh, this is like a relaxing week,
like 5 hours.
yeah,
10
right,
hours.
right. So, but that's the beauty of like when you have a routine that is just automatic, you start to build into this your your rut is somebody else's like groove. Everybody else like, oh, I'd love to be in your rut. When you're like, no, dude, that's like my rut. Like I'm down. I only worked out 20 hours this week, or 5 hours this week, or I'm only doing this bare minimum, but it's so much higher because that routine has just become automatic. And I think if we do that for our people in our companies with good systems, which is why I love QHP's management system, then we get more out of others and ourselves with less effort and stress. And that is key. And I think of always, I'll make this last comment. Clayton Christensen said, strategy is less about what you choose to do and more about what you choose not to do. And so the better companies can be about, hey, here's where we play, here's what we're going to do, here's what we're not going to do, then it creates those kind of guardrails for them to then teach their people, hey, here's how we operate. And so, for small businesses that are trying to grow and trying to get to that next level, that can often kind of pull us into, hey, we'll do anything that comes our way. When really maybe what you should do is say, hey, here's what an ideal year looks like. And then you just work to fill that ideal year with the right types of clients, the right price points, and then you just build, that business around your life versus, your life around the business.
I love it. And I think that's a great place to end, and it brings us full circle of Jing and I need to think long and hard about not necessarily what we're going to do, but also what we're not going to do now and not going to do as leaders and managers and co-CEOs 6 months, 12 months down the road, and then we'll work backwards from that using that framework.
Love that.
This has been awesome. I think we need to do multiple episodes.
Dude, it's a blast chatting with you. I'm always happy to talk to another Iron Man, especially one who's done more than me. So that's great. Maybe I got to get back on the bike and go do another one. I could tie you.
There we go. And I will make sure to get the what do you call it thing you can drag behind the bike put the kids in there.
Oh yeah, please, the little cart. Yeah,
that's the only way I can justify the training. All right. Thanks for the session.
So
appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Jordan.
See you later.
Bye.